Okay, so yeah, my name is Daria, and welcome to this adventure with me to Firebase land, particularly with DataConnect, the new SQL solution by Firebase. So a couple of facts about me is I'm an active community member in the Flutter community. I'm a Google developer expert in Flutter and Dart. I'm also a Flutterista and a Women Tech Makers ambassador, co-organizer of different events such as Flutter Riga Meetup and also recently Flutter and Friends Conference, where this year we had really cool badges, which you can reprogram like for every other conference. And if you want to see more and talk about it, come to me after the talk. I'm also the co-author of Flutter Design Patterns and Best Practices book and the co-founder of BB Apps, together with my husband, a small indie studio where we create apps that care for you and the planet. And as mentioned before, I'm a cat person, maybe something like obsessed with cats, and cats are always in my presentation. And to keep this thing a little bit more fun for you and focused, I have hidden the Cheshire cat in my slides. And the first person to, after the talk, to name the correct amount of Cheshire cats in my presentation will get a little sweet treat, which also has a cat, obviously. This is Flo, the black cat from Latvia, which this year won the first Oscar. So you can also watch the movie. And the agenda for today is we will discuss Bunny Search, one of my applications where I use DataConnect. Obviously, DataConnect and it's in action, and also check some of the edge cases beyond the basics, and try to answer the question whether should you use DataConnect or not. So BB Apps. BB Apps currently has 3 active applications that we are working on. VB Apps is my studio with my husband, and we have currently 3 active applications. One of them is the language learning, Native Pell. I've been saying the word Pol for all of the time, and apparently that's not how you pronounce it. Oh my god, I'm really bad with microphones. I'm so sorry. Okay, for 3 minutes until I again forget about it. So yeah, please remind me if you can hear me. And this is an AI language learning app. The second app is Trigger Journal, which is basically a symptom tracker and a wellness journal, which is currently ongoing redesign and refactoring and so on. So maybe don't try it out just yet and try it in a month or so. And the final app is Bunny Search, which is an app where you can check if a cosmetics brand is cruelty-free or not. But what is cruelty-free? Cruelty-free means that the cosmetics brand, doesn't test their production on animals. And animal testing is a very cruel way of testing products for safety because it involves cats, dogs, rats, hamsters, all kind of animals suffering because of the test. And there is ways to avoid that. It's actually a very old method of testing for safety, and there's many more modern methods, but they're probably more expensive. So maybe some companies want to save money on that. And there are many organizations and communities that are fighting against animal testing, which is also called cruelty-free in the community. And you may think, okay, this doesn't bother me because I don't use cosmetics, right? But let's do a little show of hands. Put your hand up if you use cosmetics like lipstick, mascara, foundation in your daily life. Okay, we have a couple. What about skincare like face creams, face washes? Okay, more people. What about deodorants, shower gels, shampoos, toothpaste? I mean, I really hope I will see all of the hands here. So yeah, this means that this topic is also relevant to you because all of these things and many more, such as like washing powders and everything related to cleaning stuff, is also potentially tested on animals. So next time you're shopping, maybe try Bunny Search app and see if the brand that you want to purchase is cruelty-free or not, and save a bunny, a hamster, or a cat. How to determine if something is cruelty-free or not? Well, there are many organizations that certify, and all of these organizations have their own criteria, not all beyond animal testing. For example, Responsible Maker Initiative, or for organic, or for like eco-friendly produce, and there are many organizations. But 2 main ones related to cruelty-free are PETA and Cruelty-Free International, also known as Leaping Bunny. And if you look at the logos, you will see that both of them have the bunny logo. And this is where the name for the app comes from. So basically, we're searching for the bunny in the cosmetics brands. And this is often can be found on the packaging. Like if you see on the other side of the packaging, you will see a bunny, but not all of the time. So do use Bunny Search to check that. And yeah, today we will follow the white rabbit or the white bunny on our adventure with DataConnect. So how Bunny Search works? It's a very simple app. You need a brand that you want to check. So you either type its name or take a photo of the product and it will recognize the name for you. And then it will find it in the database. For example, the Body Shop, we can see and decide if it's cruelty-free enough for us or not. It belongs in Petadon test list, in Leaping Bunny list, and in Ethical Elephant, cruelty-free, and also vegan list. So you decide if it's cruelty-free or not. And the data model behind this app is also quite simple. We have a list of brands. We can have many brands and information about them. And we have the collections, which are the organizations, which also have information about them. And there can be many different organizations. The thing is that each collection obviously has a lot of brands, and each brand can belong to many collections. So the relationship that we have between those two are many to many. And this relationship between the entities is why we decided that we need we need a SQL database, a relational database, because to model this kind of schema with NoSQL database would be harder and also error prone because you would need to manage the relationships somehow manually. So obviously a relational database was smart choice. The thing is, I'm an indie dev and I try to save as much time as possible. So I use backend as a service for everything possible. In this case, I use Firebase for a lot of things. But before 2024, Firebase offered only NoSQL databases. It was Firestore and Realtime Database. So if you wanted to do a relational database, you could not use Firebase. This changed on Google I/O last year, where they introduced Firebase DataConnect, a SQL database solution for Firebase. And this year at Cloud Next in April, I believe, they finally pronounced it generally available. So it's like a production ready solution, apparently. So it's been in production, like general availability for less than half a year. So you might imagine what comes with this. And the thing is, because it's a new product, also there's not that much information on the internet in general. There's not many tutorials. There are not many use cases because not a lot of people have tried it already. And also LLMs have no idea what they're talking about if you ask them about DataConnect. So they hallucinate so badly that you will learn like wrong things. And if you do try to learn about DataConnect right now, use the old school way and read the documentation. It's actually really good. So DataConnect, what it is and how it works. For this talk, I assume that you all are familiar with Firebase in general and also with at least basic concept of SQL. And by the way, let's do a little show of hands. Who here pronounces this word as SQL? Okay, majority. And does anyone pronounce it as SQL? Okay, okay, the minority of people. So yeah, I used to pronounce SQL, and then our CTO was always saying SQL, and I had no idea what is he talking about. And then one day I asked, and I'm like, oh, it makes so much sense, and like I can save 3 nanoseconds by saying SQL instead of SQL. That's what I do it. Okay, and with GraphQL, any experience or knowledge about it in general? Have you heard about GraphQL? Put your hands up. Okay, half of the people. That's good. So how DataConnect works. Obviously, it offers you a SQL database solution, which in this case is the PostgreSQL database managed by Google Cloud SQL. And then you need a way to access this data source from your client application. Oh, I hear that. I hear the difference. Sorry. And the way we access the SQL database from our client application is with the help of DataConnect. And DataConnect makes us write GraphQL code. So GraphQL is a query language which is used to create like contracts for your APIs and the way from access your data sources from your client. And we'll take a look at GraphQL obviously soon. So what you do is you write GraphQL schema, mutations, and queries. And what DataConnect does is it's generate bindings that accesses the SQL database and also generates the bindings that allow your client app to call type safely those methods to your data source. So basically, the idea in the perfect scenario is that you only write GraphQL code, run some generators, and never touch like SQL, and also use the type safe generated SDKs on your client side. And because it's a Firebase service, it's integrated with Firebase authentication, which also allows you to create secure applications. Let's take a look at how it works. And first is the setup. First thing that you need to know is that it's a paid service. It's not available on the free plan. You need to be on the Blaze plan. And you pay for the instance, depending where your instance is. Starts from $9 something per month. Then you also pay for usage starting after 2 250,000 requests per month. And obviously, if you use AI features, you would also need to separately pay for AI. So you can do your calculations to decide if it's worth it. In your Firebase console, you enable the DataConnect service. And because we're in 2025, everything has AI slapped on top of it. So the first step that we will need to do is to generate a schema, and you can do this with AI. This is what Firebase console prompts you to do. And we can describe in a natural language what we want, like from our schema. For example, an app that checks if a brand is cruelty-free by belonging to one of the organizations. Let's see what it generates. It's actually generated a pretty good schema, very close to what we have in the end because, well, it's a very basic schema. It's hard to go wrong here. And we have a brand organization and a brand organization, which is a brand belonging to a particular organization. And if you want, you can refine it further in the chat until you generate whatever works for you, or you can also just write GraphQL yourself. Then you need to set up your DataConnect service. You do that either if you already have an existing Cloud SQL instance, you could do that only with a PostgreSQL database, or you can create a new one, and then you're eligible for 3 months of free usage. And do the setup, obviously. You will also need a set of tooling to work with it locally, and you can install all of them by running one command. It will install the web-based VS Code, extension, Node.js, and things like that, everything that will make you ready to develop your requests. And this is the structure of the project that will be generated for you, and we will look deeper into it as we go. Okay, so step 1, the schema. This is the schema that we have currently in Bunny Search, which is related to brand and collections. We have a brand entity, which has some fields like name, website, parent, ID, obviously. Same for collection. And then we have a collection brand, which is a brand that belongs to a collection. This is an important one. And in this collection brand, we have a data field, which is of type any, but actually is a JSON blob. And this field will be important later on when we discuss some edge cases. Okay, let's take a look at GraphQL. This is the GraphQL version of the generated schema that I have just showed you. And if you have never worked with GraphQL, I think it's still very readable. Let's zoom in into one particular table. You can see that we use the type keywords to define a brand, and then we specify some parameters like ID name, blah, 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 and they're non-nullable strings. But what is interesting here is those annotations that we use. We use table, unique, default, and these things in GraphQL are called directives, and this is a way for you to tell GraphQL to DataConnect GraphQL to generate the according SQL entities. So for directives to create SQL entities, we have table, column, unique, default, index, ref, and view, and you can define relationships, give default values, things like that. So basically this maps to the final SQL that will be generated. And also an interesting thing that we can use are expressions. For example, in default value, I'm sorry, this will happen more. This happens sometimes to me. So yeah, we can use the auth object, which is from Firebase authentication, and we will look at it closer soon, or parameters passed to the request, such as request time to create an ad. And this is the underlying SQL that will be generated for you. You will probably not even see it. So yeah, but this is basically how it maps. And then another interesting entity that we need to take a look at is collection brand. And what interests us here is the key part, because this way we specify a compound primary key, which is compounded from the brand primary key and the collection primary key. And GraphQL knows that. We can see it in the generated schema. And we also define the relationship, like by defining this relationship, specifying the collection and the brand objects inside of the collection brand. We will be then able to query them, do join requests, and use this syntax of GraphQL to do that, such as collection brands on collection and collection brands on brands. Okay, let's do something with the data that we have created. So basically, all of the operations usually fall under the CRUD acronym, so create, read, update, delete. And we can distill this further into read and write operations, which in GraphQL language terminology are called queries and mutations. So basically, this is what you will be doing, writing queries and mutations. And they all lie in the DataConnect project that you have set up earlier. Particular mutations and queries lie in the connector folder, but you are not limited to those two. You can create other files. apparently, according to documentation. If you want better structure, I have everything in one file. All goes. And let's write some queries. So to write a query, you would obviously need to use a query keyword. And we will write a query for getting the collection by ID. And let's zoom in a little. So basically, you pass the parameters that you need to do the query. And the first thing that takes our attention is auth, but we will return to it later. So if we want to get a collection from the collection table, we would just say collection and pass the ID parameter. But before returning this to the user, what we want to do is we want to check if this collection exists and if it's not self-deleted. To do that, we have a directive called check, where we can run an expression, and we have a special keyword this, which allows us to check this instance that we have just retrieved, and we can check if it's not null and also if it's not deleted. Then we can do some authorization check and return this collection if it's public or if it belongs to this particular user. And if something is not right, then we return an error with the message collection not found. But if everything is okay, then we return these parameters: ID, name, description, owner, public, and so on. But an interesting parameter that we do care about is brand count. And the way we get the brand count parameter is we use this relationship that we have defined earlier, collection brands on collection. And this is how it looks like. We defined it in the collection brand by specifying the collection object. And now we can use this syntax to access that. And we would do that. Yeah, as I said, this syntax defines relationships. On is used for one-to-one and one-to-many, and via is used for many-to-many relationships. And we use the filter where to check to get only the brands that were not deleted. And you have a lot of filters available in the GraphQL and the DataConnect, where order by, limit, offset, and all kind of includes, excludes, and comparison parameters that you can use to create your queries. Then we have special aggregation parameters also available for us to use, such as count. And we can have more like minimum, maximum, sum, average, and so on. So you can do all kind of queries in GraphQL. Mutations. So a mutation is similar. We use a keyword that says mutation. We can also write transactions, which are atomic and act the same way as you would expect. It will fail if anything fails and revert back to the initial state. And yeah, first, before I forgot to mention what are we actually doing. We are adding brands to collection with this mutation. And before adding the brands to this collection, we want to check if it actually exists in the collection table and in the brand table. So we do that. And if everything is okay, then we move on to actually inserting the data. For that, we have also generated syntax. Can everyone in the back hear me when I don't use the microphone correctly? More or less. Well, you can come closer. Yeah. So yeah, basically you can use insert, upsert. Oh wow, that's very loud. Update, delete, and do batch updates also. Now let's return back to the authentication that we have emitted earlier. And authentication is possible thanks to Firebase authentication here. And the way authentication works in DataConnect is that you control the security on every operation. So you have to specify this on every operation. Otherwise, it's no access by default. So for example, in this case, we want this query to be available to all of the users that are at least authorized anonymously. And yeah, this is considered insecure in general. So that's why we also specify insecure reason. This is a publicly available collection so that later on in the audit, it doesn't scream at us. And this is the authentication level. But then we need to perform our own authorization, in this case, to check that this particular collection belongs to this owner. And we have the auth object from Firebase authentication, which parameters we can then use for authorized access. Yes, and auth offers different levels of access: public, anonymous user, not anonymous user, user with email verified, and no access. As I said, it is the default one. If you omit the out directive, this will be no access and only be available for admins. And we can use expressions, such as check the out object, or also if you're using Firebase authentication, custom user parameters like tokens and plans, you can check if the user has like premium access to this query, to execute this query. And when you deploy your updates, you also get the audit, and you can check if you have missed something. Now let's connect it to our client application. And the way we define those SDKs is in the connector YAML file, which we can find in the connector folder. And here is an example how it looks like initially. JavaScript SDK, Swift SDK, Kotlin SDK. No Dart SDK for some reason, and also code labs available are also only for web, Android, and iOS. And I demand a Flutter code lab for DataConnect. Otherwise, you have to rely for my talk. And for Dart, we would obviously use the Dart SDK, give the name to our connector, and define where we need the output of those generated bindings. And probably you should give it a better name than a default connector, but it was my first time using DataConnect, so default connector it is. And then step 2, connected with Firebase. Obviously, you need all of the default Firebase app setup that usually applies to apps, and also a new dependency, Firebase DataConnect, which gives you the core SDK needed for DataConnect. To generate the bindings, if you're using VS Code and the Firebase DataConnect VS Code extension, they are apparently generated automatically, but honestly, it doesn't always work for me for some reason. Maybe something's wrong with me, but yeah, if you need to generate them on demand, you can do that also by running the Firebase DataConnect SDK generate command without the watch parameter, or also if you want to run it in CI/CD. And this way you end up with a core SDK provided by the dependency and generated SDK generated for you. So for example, this is how the connector structure looks like for a bunny search application. And we have a lot of like methods, queries, mutations, and so on. This is just a glimpse to see how the generated code looks like. We have builders for all of the operations. And then if we look deeper into one of the operations, you can see there's different verifications and so on. So basically all of this mapping that you would usually do for the API yourself is done for you, and you can just plug and play and use those methods in your client apps, which makes it much more faster, and probably one of the main reasons why we even try DataConnect. So yeah, one important thing that you need to know about the way DataConnect works is that the queries and mutations are not submitted by client code and executed on the server. They're like deployed like cloud functions. So if you change something in those cloud functions, it can break existing clients, and you would need to ship update, like focus on shipping update for the client first before breaking production. So speaking about testing, deploying, and migration. Let's start with testing. And Firebase offers emulators for all of their, I don't know for all of their services, for a lot of their services, they offer emulators. And this is a way for you to test how it works without touching the production database, which you obviously don't want to do. So you would use Firebase emulators, which allow you to run the database locally. And you would do that either via CLI, and you can see the setup in the documentation, or if you're using VS Code, you can just press the Start Emulators button and verify that everything works in your console. And then to connect it to the client app, you would just need it in your setup, in your bootstrapping area of your code. Can use the DataConnect emulator, specify host and port, and then you will be using the development database. Okay, deploying. So we're ready to deploy our changes, and what do we do? It's going to be a very hard process. We call Firebase deploy. And basically, that's it. And if you're lazy enough to write this, you can also press the button deploy to production. But keep in mind that if you run Firebase deploy, it will deploy everything that is deployable, such as cloud functions and hosting. So if you want to deploy on a DataConnect, obviously specify the flags. And also if you want to deploy only changes to specific connectors, also specify that. So what if you have changes? How to migrate? Well, migration rules are described in DataConnect YAML, which is stored in your project. And you have two options. You have two types of schema validations, compatible and strict. Strict means that the database schema must match exactly the application schema. And if something doesn't match, it will be dropped. So be very careful with that. And compatible means that, of course, the schema still needs to be compatible, but if you have anything else like tables, columns, indexes, and so on, it will not be dropped. It will be ignored. And also, yeah, strict is a destructive migration, potentially. So in production, you would obviously want, like for production databases, not when developing, you would definitely want to use compatible. Make sure that this is what you're doing. And this needs to be specified explicitly in the DataConnect YAML because by default it's undefined and you don't want to rely on undefined. So if you have made changes to your schema, you can check the diff to see like what are the changes and what you need to do to migrate by running the Firebase DataConnect SQL diff command. You can also do migrate, but if you run migrate and you have compatible schema validation type, then you will, and breaking changes, you will run into an error. Because, for example, if you have added a non-nullable column to an existing table and you can't specify the values for the existing rows, then you will have this problem. And the thing is, well, then you need to manually migrate your database. I don't think I haven't found any mechanism except that you should write your own migrations in SQL and run your script, have your tooling, whatever you have set up and connected with your database. So be careful with breaking changes. So yeah, a couple of things about versioning is that to be able to do rollbacks, and in general, it's good to use the version control for your DataConnect schema, and also only one version can exist at the same time. So be careful with that. The approach to migration should be migrating the connectors and clients first, and then when everyone's migrated, for example, with force update or something mechanism on your client side, after that only migrate the server, because otherwise you might break the existing clients. And well, thank you, Cap. Avoid breaking changes if possible. And when migrating, also you can use retired and deprecated directives in your GraphQL schema. And if you really must, use manual versioning, such as write mutations like get list version 2 and use that. You can also monitor your database. You can monitor the usage, the health, and so on in Firebase console and also in the Google Cloud console, and do all kind of things there. These were the basic use cases that are allowed by DataConnect. Like if you don't go beyond that, it looks all nice and easy. But what if you want to implement fuzzy search, for example? So in my app, if you type a brand name with a typo or a misspelling or with an accent, and if it does if you make a typo, it should still be able to find the result, because that's how search works expectedly. So if we type Catrice, the actual brand name should still be found. And to be able to do that, the algorithms are called like fuzzy search or approximate string matching, and they're different ones. I've actually written an article if you want to read about that, how to do that in Dart with Levenshtein's distance in my newsletter. But the way we do it in Bunny Search is because we're using a database, we use a PostgreSQL trigram extension, which is a Postgre extension to perform this kind of fuzzy search. And the way it works is it generates special functions and operators for you to use in SQL to be able to perform this fuzzy search. And because it generates special operators and functions, like the code could look like that. Let's take a look how this would work. We could call the similarity function and use the operators to do the comparison. And also we have a score, which we can then decide if the score is high enough for us to return this result. Well, because of this, because we can't run raw SQL in GraphQL, there is no way to specify that. We would need a way to run this SQL command ourselves, and we would do that usually via Firebase Cloud Functions. So if you were hoping to use DataConnect to avoid using Cloud Functions, if you have non-trivial use cases, probably that still will not be possible yet. Another use case is unstructured data. So in Bunny Search, for each organization, we can have different kind of information. For example, for a compassionate shopping guide, specifies if this brand has eco-friendly options. PETSA specifies if this brand has vegan options. And then EcoCert specifies a lot of different things and a lot of different certificates. And all of this data is different for each organization. So as I mentioned earlier in the talk, we use a JSON for that, because we can have different parameters, and mapping this to columns and so on would be very hard and result in a lot of unnecessary data. So yeah, we use JSON for that. And what we want to do in the functionality in the app is return dynamically filtered collections by JSON fields. So for example, I would want to see a list of all vegan brands. For that, I would want to see an entity like this, a vegan collection brand, which has all of the general information about the brand, but also we know that it's vegan. And to create this type of entity, we can use the the view directive in GraphQL. And in this view directive, we write our own custom SQL, again, because we need to access the JSON blob field because it's not supported by GraphQL, DataConnect GraphQL in general. So if we want to access those fields which are supported in Postgre, we would write our own raw SQL and use the view directive for that. But be careful because Firebase DataConnect doesn't validate the SQL that you write here. Like if you fail to do something, if it fails and so on, then that's on you. Yeah, so be careful with that. A couple of more capabilities that I have not used, but that Firebase DataConnect offers is full text search. It's actually pretty recent, I think. You would do that by marking the necessary fields for a searchable. You can do that for different supported languages. You can also do different types of search, such as full phrases, queries like in the web, with parameters like and or not. Just for words, for example, if you search for pink cat, it can return pink and red cat. It will still find it. And things like that, and also control the relevance threshold. And obviously, it's also AI first, and it supports the vector similarity search with Vertex AI. It can generate the vector embeddings for you, and you can use this in your AI applications. A couple of missing features from DataConnect. One of them is the real-time query updates. So for example, if you want to subscribe to something and react to the updates done to the database, you can't do that. Event triggers, like we do with Firestore, we listen to some events, to some writes to the database, to the Firestore database. We can't do that with DataConnect yet, hopefully, and also yet probably no offline support and no caching. So let's summarize. Is Firebase DataConnect for you? Well, to make this decision, you would need to answer some questions, because if you have an existing database and infrastructure, like think several times, why would you want to migrate? Because you would also need to learn another tool and another language, such as GraphQL. How simple is your application? Because if you go beyond simple use cases, then you will find yourself still writing a lot of cloud functions, raw SQL, and things like that. And then maybe it doesn't make that much sense for you. Do you plan to use custom database extensions a lot? Because this also, again, leads to the problem of writing your own SQL in cloud functions. Do you want to avoid writing cloud functions? Do you already use them a lot? And do you already know the GraphQL language, or want to learn it, and also how it works specifically in DataConnect? Is Firebase DataConnect for us? Well, some experiences that we had, we have implemented it, I think, in April. And at the time, the thing is that when we deployed this extension for fuzzy search, every time we did a schema update, even if it was compatible, it still dropped the indices, and we had to manually redeploy them again every time. Extensions are not supported, so this can also lead to problems. We had a scenario when the database stopped working in production for no reason, like no changes from us at all. I just opened the app and realized that nothing is loading, and we could not find any issues and no comments or anything like that. And all we tried, what we could do is just redeploy the database, and then it started magically working. So that was a very stressful situation because we could not find a reason why the database was down. And raw SQL is only supported with custom cloud functions or by using the view directive in your type definition. So yeah, you make your own decision. Thank you for your attention. You can leave your review for this talk. I would be very grateful. It's a new talk for me, so yes. And you can also follow me on different social media and check out my apps at bbapps.dev. Thank you.